The VA office called asking why I'd signed paperwork transferring my ex-husband's military benefits to his new wife. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known he'd remarried. Then the VA investigator said something that stopped my heart. According to our records, you're still his legal spouse. There was never a finalized divorce. His wife wasn't his wife. She was a fraud. And so was he. I'm Linda Patterson, and I'm 66 years old. For the past 12 years, I thought I was divorced from my ex-husband, James Patterson, a retired Army sergeant who served 2 tours in Iraq and came home different from the man I'd married. We'd been together for 28 years before I finally accepted that our marriage was over. Or so I thought. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the phone call that shattered everything I believed about my life for the past 12 years. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my phone rang with a Virginia area code I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Patterson? This is Denise Crawford from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm calling about some paperwork we received regarding your husband's military benefits. I think you have the wrong person. I've been divorced for 12 years. Our records show you as the current spouse of James Michael Patterson, SSN ending in 4782. Is that correct? My stomach dropped. That was James's social security number. That was my ex-husband, yes. But we divorced in 2011. Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you some questions about documents we received 6 months ago. Did you sign a benefits transfer form relinquishing your claim to spousal and survivor benefits in favor of a Mrs. Rachel Patterson? Who? Rachel Patterson, listed as Mr. Patterson's current wife. I don't know anyone named Rachel. And I didn't sign anything about benefits because I'm not entitled to them anymore. We're divorced. The pause on the other end lasted too long. Mrs. Patterson, could you please hold for a moment? I need to bring my supervisor into this conversation. I waited, my heart pounding with a dread I couldn't name. When Denise came back on the line, she had someone else with her. Mrs. Patterson, this is Frank Martinez, Senior Investigator with the VA Office of Inspector General. I need to ask you some very specific questions, and I need you to answer honestly. Did you sign any documents in April of this year regarding your ex-husband's military benefits? No. I haven't had any contact with James in over a decade. Did you authorize anyone to sign documents on your behalf? No. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to ask you something that may come as a shock. When exactly did you and James Patterson finalize your divorce? In 2011. Late summer, I think. August or September. Do you have a copy of the final divorce decree? I thought about that. James had handled all the paperwork with his lawyer. He'd told me everything was filed, that it was done. I'd believed him because why wouldn't I? James's lawyer handled everything. He told me it was finalized. But you never received official documentation from the court. I received some papers. I don't remember exactly what they were. It was 12 years ago. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to understand something. According to county records in Richmond, Virginia, where you filed for divorce, there is no final divorce decree on file for James Michael Patterson and Linda Marie Patterson. Your divorce was never finalized. The room spun. That's not possible. James told me. What your husband told you and what actually happened appear to be very different things. Mrs. Patterson, legally, you are still married to James Patterson. Which means the woman claiming to be his wife and collecting benefits as his spouse is committing federal fraud. I sat down heavily, my legs unable to support me. I've been married for 12 years and didn't know it. It appears that way. And someone has been forging your signature on official VA documents to transfer benefits to a woman named Rachel Winters, who has been presenting herself as Rachel Patterson, James's legal wife. Why would they do this? Because military survivor benefits are substantial. If James dies, his legal spouse receives a significant life insurance payout, continued healthcare coverage, and monthly survivor benefits. Someone wanted to make sure that when James dies, Rachel gets that money instead of you. The full scope of the fraud was starting to dawn on me. How much money are we talking about? The life insurance alone is $400,000, plus monthly benefits that could total hundreds of thousands more over a lifetime. $400,000. That's what my signature was worth to whoever had forged it. What happens now? My voice sounded distant, disconnected. Now we investigate. I'm going to need you to come to our Richmond office to give a formal statement and review the forged documents. We'll also need to verify your signature against what was submitted. Mrs. Patterson, this is a federal crime. Whoever did this is looking at serious prison time. 3 days later, I sat in a government office building in Richmond, looking at documents that bore a signature that looked like mine but wasn't quite right. The Y in my last name curved differently. The dot over the I in Linda was too precise. These were good forgeries, but they weren't perfect. Frank Martinez sat across from me with a female agent named Sarah Chen. Between them were spread 6 months of paperwork, all supposedly signed by me, all transferring my legal rights to James's benefits to a woman I'd never met. Tell me about your divorce, Frank said. Walk me through exactly what happened. I took a breath, thinking back to 2011. James came back from his second deployment different. Angry, distant. We tried counseling, but he refused to really participate. After 2 years of trying, I told him I wanted a divorce. How did he react? He agreed immediately. Said he'd been thinking the same thing. He hired a lawyer, some guy he knew from his veterans group. Said he'd handle everything to make it easier on me. And you trusted him? We'd been married 28 years. Why wouldn't I trust him? Sarah Chen leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, did you ever appear in court for divorce proceedings? I thought about it. No. James's lawyer said we qualified for an uncontested divorce, that we didn't need to appear if we both agreed to the terms. What were the terms? I kept the house and my retirement account. He kept his military pension and benefits. We split the savings. It seemed fair. Frank exchanged a look with Sarah. Mrs. Patterson, in Virginia, even an uncontested divorce requires at least one party to appear before a judge to finalize the decree. If neither of you appeared, the divorce was never completed. But I signed papers. James brought me a stack of documents, and I signed everything. We'd like to see those documents if you still have them. I went home and tore through my filing cabinet until I found the folder labeled Divorce, 2011. Inside were papers that looked official, with James's lawyer's letterhead and legal language about dissolution of marriage. But as I read through them more carefully, I realized none of them were the actual final decree. They were preliminary filings, separation agreements, financial disclosures. Nothing that said the divorce was complete. When I brought them to Frank, he nodded grimly. These are initial filings. The divorce process was started but never finished. My guess is James's lawyer filed these, then James told him to stop the process without telling you. Why would he do that? Because as long as you're legally married, you're entitled to his military benefits. But if you don't know you're married, you won't claim them. Which leaves the door open for someone else to commit fraud. Rachel. We need to talk to you about Rachel Winters. What do you know about her? Nothing. I've never heard that name before. Sarah pulled out a photograph. This is Rachel Winters, also known as Rachel Patterson. Do you recognize her? The woman in the photo was probably in her early 50s, blonde, attractive in that carefully maintained way that requires money and effort. I'd never seen her before in my life. No. Who is she? She's been living with James for approximately 8 years. Presents herself as his wife to neighbors, friends, everyone. She's listed as his spouse on his VA healthcare records, his banking information, everything. So he's been married to both of us. Bigamy, Frank said. Another federal crime. But here's where it gets interesting. Rachel works as an administrative assistant at a VA regional office. She works for the VA. She has access to veteran records, benefit information, all the internal knowledge needed to commit this kind of fraud. We believe she identified James as a target because of his substantial benefits, got close to him, and has been systematically positioning herself to claim everything when he dies. Does James know about the fraud? That's what we need to determine. It's possible he's a victim too, that Rachel has been manipulating him. Or he's a willing participant. I thought about James, about the man I'd known for 3 decades. He'd been honorable once, before the war changed him. But the James who came back wasn't the same man. That James had lied to me about the divorce. Had let me believe for 12 years that I was free when I wasn't. I think he knows, I said quietly. James was never stupid. If he's been with this woman for 8 years and she's telling people she's his wife, he knows. Over the next 2 weeks, Frank and Sarah built their case. They subpoenaed James's bank records and found monthly deposits from the VA going into a joint account he shared with Rachel. They interviewed neighbors who confirmed James and Rachel had been presenting themselves as a married couple for years. They obtained phone records showing calls between Rachel's work number and James's cell phone, discussing benefit transfers and paperwork. And they brought me in to meet James face-to-face for the first time in 12 years. The interview room at the federal building was exactly what you'd imagine from TV shows: grey walls, metal table, recording equipment. I sat on one side with Frank and Sarah. James sat on the other with a public defender who looked barely out of law school. He'd aged, my not-quite ex-husband. Grey hair, deeper lines around his eyes, the military posture slightly stooped. But his eyes were the same, that flat effect that had appeared after Iraq and never quite went away. Linda. He said my name like an acknowledgement, not a greeting. James. I hear we are still married. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I can explain. Please do. I'm fascinated to hear how you forgot to finalize our divorce for 12 years. His lawyer started to object, but James waved him off. I didn't forget. I stopped the process on purpose. Why? Because I needed you to still be my legal spouse. For what? For the benefits. If something happened to me, I needed you to be able to collect them. I stared at him. James, I haven't spoken to you in over a decade. Why would you care if I collected your benefits? Because Rachel can't. She's not my legal wife. No, she's your illegal wife. You committed bigamy. Not legally. We never actually got married. I told her we did, had a ceremony with a fake minister, gave her a ring. But it wasn't legal because I was still married to you. The room went silent. Frank leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, are you saying Rachel Winters doesn't know your marriage to her isn't legal? She thinks we are married. I never corrected her. Why? I asked, though I was starting to understand. Because I needed her to think she'd inherit my benefits. She's younger, healthier. She'll take care of my affairs when I'm gone. But legally, everything goes to you. James, someone forged my signature to transfer benefits to Rachel. 6 months of documents, all fake. His face went pale. What? Sarah slid the documents across the table. These were submitted to the VA in April, signed by Linda Patterson, transferring all spousal and survivor benefits to Rachel Winters Patterson. Except Linda didn't sign them. James stared at the papers, and I saw genuine shock in his eyes. Rachel did this. Who else had access to your benefit information and Linda's personal details? I don't understand. Why would she forge these? I told her she'd inherit everything anyway. Because she's been researching, James, Frank said. She works for the VA. She knows how benefit inheritance works. She probably discovered that your divorce was never finalized, which means Linda is still your legal spouse. So she forged documents to make herself the legal beneficiary. But I wanted Linda to have the benefits. I laughed, a bitter sound. James, you let me believe we were divorced for 12 years. You've been living with another woman, telling people she's your wife, letting her commit fraud using my identity. You don't get to pretend this was all some noble plan to take care of me. I was protecting you. If I'd told you we were still married, you'd have been liable for my debts, my problems. This way, you were free but still protected. I wasn't free. I couldn't remarry because I thought I was divorced. I couldn't move on with my life because you lied to me. His lawyer intervened. My client is clearly a victim here. This Rachel person has been manipulating him, committing fraud in his name. Your client, Sarah said coldly, committed bigamy by presenting Rachel as his wife for 8 years. He lied to his legal spouse about their marital status. And he provided Rachel with Linda's personal information that enabled the forgery. He's not a victim, counselor. He's an accomplice. The federal charges came down 3 weeks later. Rachel Winters was charged with identity theft, forgery of government documents, fraud against the United States, and theft of veteran benefits. James was charged with bigamy, conspiracy to commit fraud, and providing false information to federal officials. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Rachel's work computer showed she'd researched veteran benefits eligibility, looking specifically at widow inheritance rules. Her home computer had saved templates for VA benefit transfer forms with Linda's information. And phone records showed she'd called James multiple times discussing the Linda problem and benefit transfers. James cooperated with prosecutors, testifying against Rachel in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admitted he'd told Rachel about me, about our unfinalized divorce, and had shared my personal information thinking she was just updating his records at work. He claimed he hadn't known she was forging documents, and maybe that was true. Maybe James was just stupid enough to trust a woman who saw him as a paycheck. Rachel showed no remorse. During her testimony, she actually argued that she deserved the benefits more than I did. I've been taking care of James for 8 years while Linda moved on with her life. I've earned those benefits. By committing federal crimes, the prosecutor asked. By being there when his actual wife abandoned him. The jury took 4 hours to convict her on all counts. Rachel got 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and full restitution of any benefits she'd fraudulently received. James got 2 years for bigamy and conspiracy, suspended sentence with probation because of his cooperation and military service. I sat through every day of the trial, watching 2 people I'd never wanted to think about again destroy each other with the truth. After the sentencing, James's lawyer approached me in the hallway. Mrs. Patterson, my client would like to finalize the divorce proceedings immediately. He's prepared to waive all rights to marital assets and will not contest any of your requests. Tell James I'll have my lawyer contact his. We should have done this 12 years ago. He wants you to know he's sorry. For all of it. I'm sure he is. Now that his lies cost him federal charges and 2 years probation. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. This time, I appeared in court. This time, I received an official decree. This time, I watched the judge sign the papers that ended a marriage that should have ended more than a decade ago. The VA sorted out the benefit mess, restoring me as James's legal spouse for the relevant period and ensuring Rachel's forged documents were voided. They also implemented new verification procedures to prevent this kind of fraud in the future. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I also received an unexpected check. Because I'd technically been married to James during the 12 years I thought I was divorced, I was legally entitled to a portion of his military pension for that period. The VA calculated I was owed approximately $78,000 in back payments. It felt like blood money, but I deposited it anyway. I'd earned it by living 12 years of my life in a lie James had created. Last month, I went on my first real date since 2011. His name is Robert, he's a retired teacher, and when I told him about the whole mess with James and Rachel, he just shook his head and said, "Well, at least you know for sure you're divorced now." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Yes. I have the decree framed on my wall just to be sure. That's not crazy at all, Robert said with a smile. After what I've been through, a little paranoia seems reasonable. We are taking things slow, Robert and I. There's no rush. I spent 12 years thinking I was free when I wasn't. Now that I actually am free, I'm going to enjoy it. Christopher called me yesterday to check in. He'd followed the whole trial in the news, mortified that his mother had become part of a federal fraud case. Mom, are you okay? Like, really okay? I'm better than okay, honey. I'm actually free now. Legally, officially, documented by the court free. That's good. Because that whole thing was insane. Which part? The bigamy, the fraud, or the fact that I was married for 12 years without knowing it? All of it. Dad's life choices have always been questionable, but this was next level. James isn't Christopher's father. Christopher is from my first marriage, but he'd always called James Dad growing up. That relationship was another casualty of James's lies. Have you talked to him? I asked. Once. He's living in a VA-sponsored housing facility now. Rachel obviously didn't want anything to do with him after the trial. He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you were doing fine and he should probably leave you alone forever. Good advice. I think about James sometimes, about the man he used to be before the war changed him. I think about Rachel, sitting in federal prison because she saw a vulnerable veteran and decided he was worth $500,000 in benefits. And I think about myself, about how I'd trusted James to handle our divorce, trusted that the man I'd known for 3 decades wouldn't lie about something so fundamental. Trust is a strange thing. You build it over years, over decades, over shared experiences and promises kept. But it only takes one lie to shatter it completely. And sometimes that lie echoes for 12 years before you discover the truth. I learned something important through all of this. Always verify. Always get your own lawyer. Always check the official documents yourself. Never assume that someone you trust is handling things properly, because even good people can make terrible decisions. And bad people? They'll exploit your trust in ways you never imagined. Rachel thought she'd found the perfect mark, a damaged veteran with substantial benefits and a trusting nature. What she didn't count on was the VA's fraud detection improving, or the fact that forged signatures can be detected, or that federal crimes carry serious consequences. James thought he was being clever, keeping me legally married while telling me we were divorced, protecting my access to benefits while living with another woman. What he didn't count on was his wife being smarter and more ruthless than he was. And me? I learned that even at 66, after thinking your life is settled and your past is behind you, the truth can show up in a phone call and change everything. The VA benefits are now properly assigned to me as James's former spouse for the years we were married. If James dies, I'll receive survivor benefits based on our marriage, properly calculated and legally documented. Rachel will receive nothing, because she was never his legal wife, just a criminal who thought she could steal her way to financial security. Sometimes I wonder if James thinks about that choice he made in 2011, to stop the divorce proceedings without telling me. Did he really think he was protecting me? Or was it easier to lie than to completely let go? I'll never know for sure. And honestly, I don't need to know. What I need to know is that I'm divorced now, really and truly divorced. The state of Virginia says so. The federal government says so. And most importantly, I know so. That's worth more than any benefit payment could ever be. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments.